Hello and welcome again to the Writer Review. This is Eric Correct Writer, and this week we're going to be taking a look back at the 2004 sports drama titled Friday Night Lights. Now, Friday Night Lights runs for 1 hour and 58 minutes long. It is directed by Peter Berg. It is produced by Brian Grazer. The script was written by David Aaron Cohen and Peter Berg. It's based on a book by H.G. Bissinger. The score was done by Brian Wrightsell, Explosions in the Sky, and David Torn. The cinematography was done by Tobias Schesler, and the editing was done by Kobe Parker, David Rosenblum, and Gabrielle Fasulo. And the stars of the movie are Billy Bob Thornton, Derek Luke, Jay Hernandez, Lucas Black, Garrett Hedlund, Tim McGraw, Lee Jackson, Lee Thompson Young, Connie Britton, and Amber Heard. So the movie goes a little something like this. Set in the town of Odessa, Texas in 1988. This is usually the setting in Texas setting of Odessa. The town is usually kind of drab, ordinary. Nothing really exciting goes on in that town. This is not particularly the town that people usually want to spend their lives. This is actually basically a town where a lot of youth would like to get away from. You know, this is not exactly the town that you want to, that's gonna make you want to move forward in life, because there's really not much going for them. The only time this city seems to brighten up is when the high school football champions come to town. It's like this is their livelihood. This is the only thing that they got going for them in this town of Odessa, is when the high school championships are going. And it's not just the town that lives and depends and eats and breathes on this, but the parents of these players seem to have this idea that this is all that's coming to them. Once the championships season is over, it's back to square one. It's back to their ordinary lives. So there's a lot of dependency that's going on, not just towards the coach and the players, no, but the whole town as a whole. So this town is definitely thriving to make it to the state finals, the high school state finals. But the issues go way beyond the gridiron. As, you know, players are faced with personal issues as we cross-examine them through the benefits of sports and the triumphs and setbacks that come with the package, while the whole town wants the team to win like their lives are depending on them. There's a lot of intensity that really definitely goes on in this movie, and as a whole, I think it actually works very, very well on many, many levels. Okay, one of the things that kind of stands out about this movie is that this is not, you know, like the cliched underdog story with the selected team we're forced to root for. Definitely goes all the way. You know, you see that in a lot of sports teams movies, you know, guys and girls who look like their chances of winning are slim to none. They've struggled early on. They need the motivation, and all these other, you know, cliches that seem to be kind of like chronically done to death. At least, you know, this movie doesn't have the underdog team winning. Sure, they put on an effort Sure, they go out there, they give it their all, but still, in this movie, they do come out empty-handed. Maybe they might earn some respect for their efforts, but in the end, no one comes out the winner, except for the rival team that they're up against. Even though I think the rival team actually cheated to win. But then again, that's life. Even if you're the underdog who has also came from humble beginnings and then worked their way up, they don't always come out on top. And it doesn't have to be that way. And I think that's what actually makes this movie very, very original. The big rewards are the events that led to the team winning, which is more reflective in storytelling and feels more refreshing in its premise. There are moments that are melancholy and humane, intense and surreal, hopeless and triumphant. Sure, this film seems to be the perfect companion for sports lovers, but if you're not fanatical about sports, let alone football, well, there's plenty more to like about this film. The human issues depicted in this movie has equally poignant moments than compared to the action on the football field. So, if you don't understand the game of football, or you don't really particularly are keen on the sport, the drama within the players and the situations they faced will probably surely likely keep you in stitches. Under the direction of Peter Berg, who has kind of made the transition from actor to director, he of course co-starred with Linda Fiorentino in The Last Seduction, utilizes his power to tell an intriguing story while pulling no punches about it. Sure, the settings of this film is in the late 1980s. You wouldn't really know the difference with its modern outlook. There are some stuff that might probably have some 80s feel to it. The cheerleaders, the girls seem to have, the big thick hair that was in the 80s. Yes, hairspray was the big thing in the 80s. I should know. I was a child in the 80s. So I kind of know a thing or two about being in the 80s. But the cuts definitely in this movie are definitely quick-paced. The handheld shots are quick-tempered, but it definitely works effectively due to the point that comes behind it all. Sometimes, the shaky cam stuff annoys the shit out of me. But here, at least, it is used for effective to give the story across. So, I have no problems with the whole shaky cam stuff. It actually works effectively considering the action and the quick jumping from one scene to the next. Because let's face it, the emphasis is going to be on pretty much the main characters and their struggles, not just on the gridiron, but their personal relations as well. Their personal affairs also comes in handy in this. Berg wants us to be a part of his world, contrary to the ones we live in. His concentration is not about the actual game, but the dramatic scenes that led prior to the climactic game. Like it was a memory we can reminisce to our grandchildren when we get older. And I think he actually does that very, very well. I mean, I think this probably might be something that these players can tell to their kids, to their grandkids about this winning experience. And this was actually inspired by true events, but however, I guess the personal issues, the behind-the-scenes stuff is probably all secondary. We don't actually know if all these things happened in real life. But, the Odessa team, I forget what the name of the team was, anyhow, they didn't win that year. They would win the next year. But, life, that's what the way life goes. You win some, you lose some. You can't win all the time, but also, by way of contrast, you can't lose all the time. While filmed in stock angles, the film truly feels like a flashback. Personally, I think it kind of felt more like a documentary a bit. It had documentary intentions going for it, but, I guess even a flashback is, best to describe it as well. The period details are enough to this film. A more storied effect in its presentation, making this archaic technique all the more sufficient. The film does succeed giving the background that 1980s vibe with the costumes, the clothing, and the props that were prominent to the time period this film was set in. The jerry curls. What else happened in the 80s? Michael Jackson was still black. Okay, I'm sorry about that part. Ronald Reagan was still running the country. The Soviet Union was crumbling. I don't know if they actually raised those kind of issues, but that's kind of like some things that happened back in the 1980s that you could think of. I mean, I was just randomly dropping things out of a hat, but you know what I'm getting at. A fine example is that the female co-stars are sporting the typical big, thick-haired pompadour that was truly apropos for the 1980s, along with your Samantha Foxes and your Lisa and Cult Jams, and your Michael Jackson, Prince's, Salt and Pepper, Bon Jovi, if you're into that kind of stuff, Def Leppard, In Excess, or if you're into country music, you would have your, well, no, I'm not really a big, huge fan of country music, but, okay, Randy Travis, there. You can't get more 80s than Randy Travis. Along with a few others. Call me biased, but it's the way it goes. It's not my style of music. Alright, so the main character in this movie is Coach Gaines, and he is played by Billy Bob Thornton. He adds to the authenticity as a coach, and he has sort of authenticity that could resemble something like a young Jimmy Swaggart as Coach Gary Gaines, who combines the willfulness to win while playing an important role in his young players' lives. So, this coach is not just a guy who is destined to win the state championship, even though he is under the stress from this town, because they're threatening to fire him. He is, of course, under the knife that well, not necessarily under the knife, but under the threat that if he doesn't win, they're gonna fire him. He's gonna have to sell his house. He's gonna have to move to another area. Because, not only is he being harassed on the gridiron or in the stadiums, he is also getting personal lashings in the radio, on the streets. Because everybody wants him to win a state championship, they don't want to be placed in second. This is either it. Either you win or you're gone. Everything is dependent on this one particular game. And nobody is going to show any remorse for it. So it's either you shape up your team or ship out. You have two options, and I would just take the first. No questions asked. He can really truly turn the role of his personality, as he can be volatile in one moment and then compassionate in another. He's like the typical coach you would see in a lot of sports movies. He might seem a little tough on the outside, but deep down inside, he knows that the players, their livelihood depends on this game, but so does his. So he tries to make a better understanding of his players. But then again, the football roster is very heavy-handed, so maybe he may not be able to focus on all of the players. Maybe he has the time, but maybe many of them just weren't really put into the mix. But he knows what they're going through. They're under the knife just as much as he is. When you think about this town of Odessa, Texas, couldn't they have gotten any more selfish? But then again, it's just the way it goes. Nothing more to say on that. Coach Gaines has a lot on his mind, as he's placed in the disposition of very talented players. They are still green, but he hopes to change that with their need for speed. And one of the more prominent characters on the gridiron is a young man who goes by the name of Booby Miles, played by Derek Luke. I think he's got actually the most interesting side subplot or side story towards this movie, aside from winning the championship and gaining exceptional fame and gaining approval from this rather selfish town. Booby Miles, thinks he's on top of everything, He is probably one of the best players on the team. This guy thinks he's above everyone else, and that he's got it all. He's got the talent to be a top player. He's got the academic grades. He's gonna go to some big Ivy League college, even though you can kind of clearly tell that he's pretty much, when it comes to the academic stuff, he's pretty much all talk. But he does actually back up his sayings by saying that he is a great, talented, and one of the top players on the team. And actually the team does depend on him, even though he's not really actually doing it for the team. He's an arrogant, cocky individual who's out to do this only for himself. Sure, there's some ways that in football you do have to please yourself, but football is a team sport, and there is no I in teamwork, even though Billy thinks that there actually is, because he's not doing it for the team. Everything he's doing for himself. Well, eventually, that is until plans eventually come into question when an injury eventually sidelines him. So now Booby has to think from outside while looking on, sitting out, while seeking other options in life outside of football. It just goes to show you that arrogance comes unrewarded. And that, I know at one time this guy was like a smooth-talking, arrogant individual. But now, with this fatal injury going, his ego is not so inflated anymore. The guy is to go through some serious operations. And that if he doesn't get these operations going, it could cause permanent damage to his leg. This is not just some simple little sprain. His injury was far more serious. And if he doesn't, and that maybe now he might have to think of some other things that he can do in life that doesn't pertain to football. It's kind of sad when you think about it. All your hopes get crushed. But then again, that just adds to the realism of the story. Everything in this movie has a lot of realism, aside from the based on true events. Players do get injured, and it doesn't matter whether you're one of the top players. You could be the top of the world, and the next thing you know, one career-ending injury, and it's over. And now he's not such a smooth-talking, suave individual. It's just the way life is. Not everybody comes out the winner. Though Berg and screenwriter David Aaron Cohen, based on the novel by Buzz Bissinger, they lures into caring about which team is going to win. It does not mean the characters themselves feel the same way. Therefore, we definitely truly get a better understanding about how obsessive the town is in its dependence, not on how the team is playing, just as long as they win the state championship. Even if they have to cheat to win, nothing matters to them except for that state championship. Every other time in life in that town is just one long, cynical slog. But the championship season, the town definitely lights up brighter than the neon lights of Sin City. The stress factor is definitely on these kids as they strive to make these memories all the more worthwhile, while trying to appease to the drab, unmotivated adults which lacks in any healthy relations. In fact, there are some like really painful situations. One of the side stories that deals, of course, just how selfish and how dependent this town of Odessa is. We get that from, even though he's a country music star, we have Tim McGraw in this movie. He plays a character by the name of Billingsley. Billingsley is an abusive father to one of the players, and he gives us a unhealthy reprimand to his son that this game will mean more to him than anything he's ever going to achieve in life. He gives out the message like, once this game is over, it's finished. Billingsley was once a state champion in Odessa, Texas. And you know, this guy practically forces, not just motivates, he forces his son to win. And if he doesn't win, figuratively, his son is practically dead to him. He one time was once a state champion, but now he's kind of like a chronic alcoholic. He's abused his son, and it seems like all he ever wants from his son is to win that state championship. Like nothing else means anything. Granted, he's right. Like many others in that town, whose one-track mind fixation is all that's coming to them. The execution to that frame of mind is definitely handled brilliantly. As much as we don't like to really talk too much about it, let's face it, things that you achieve in high school will probably definitely have the lingering effect as you move forward in life. So when Gaines drives home after being ostracized over the radio, he's confronted by two local townspeople threatening his job if he doesn't win. Gee, no rest for the weary. But then again, this is just another example of how much this town gets so caught up with one thing, they don't care about anything else the rest of the year. Even though as adults they'll remember this event as long as they live, the kids they were back then were left feeling miserable, frustrated and stressed out, not from the coach or the regiment or even alone the game, but the townsfolk who forced them to excel, not through their hard work, but by their own personal pride. The attention is definitely bestowed upon Lucas Black's performance as the star quarterback, and definitely Garrett Hedlund shines as the young Billingsley. Lucas Black, of course, comes from a single-parent home who's doing everything he can to nurture his mentally ill mother. Garrett Hedlund wants to try to please his father so that he doesn't abuse him anymore, or at least try to win the respect from him. And although this is definitely masked as a football film, the drama of the story is about a football team drafted into a metaphorical war zone, obsessed by the neurotic pleasures of the citizens of Odessa, Texas. Now, I'm not really actually familiar with the town of Odessa, Texas, and maybe they might be wrongly portrayed here in this sense. I mean, maybe Odessa, Texas isn't just this football-crazed, cynical, drab city. Maybe there's a lot more to this town than meets the eye. But this is just a depiction of this movie. And I'm sure Odessa is not the only city in the United States that has this feeling. Whenever state championships comes to a respective city in any state possible, maybe this is something that their lives depend on as well. But since this was set in 1988 and Odessa was in the state championships at the time, they decided to use this town as the backdrop, because it did happen that year. And yes, granted, the city, the town that this movie was depicted, did not win. Even in real life, I went and did my research. They would win the next year. But the players that were featured in this movie, well, they're all either gone off to college or a trade or maybe out to get a job somewhere. And, you know, Coach Gaines, you know, he would still stay in the town. Even though they came up short, at least the town of Odessa can breathe some light upon that, well, there's always next year. We just won't have the same players. So overall, you know, I thought that this was a really, really well executed movie. The acting was very good. The drama was really well put. The climactic finals was pretty intense. If you are into football, but you know, even if you're not a football fan, there's a lot of great drama that goes around. So therefore, all said and done, if I was to give this movie a score out of 10, I would give Friday Night Lights 9 footballs out of 10. I highly recommend it. It's not the greatest movie in the world, but you know, it's still very pleasing. And it doesn't rest on cliche. So I guess this ends my writer review. Thank you all for listening in. If you wish to subscribe to my channel, please feel free to do so. If you wish to leave a comment, go right ahead. But just remember, be kind, be courteous, and don't be rude. And I will be back again with another movie review. So until next time, this is Eric Wright Writer saying keep watching those movies, and I'll see you around. Goodbye.